The rain fell in sheets, blurring the world outside the floor-to-ceiling window into a wash of neon and gray. He stood motionless, a statue carved from shadows and tailored silk, and watched her walk away. Each step she took down the glistening pavement was a separate, distinct agony, a fresh twist of the knife he deserved. On her left hand, a simple jade ring caught the slick reflection of a streetlight. His mother's ring. The sight of it was a punch to the gut, stealing the air from his lungs all over again. She didn't know. She couldn't know. And now, because of him, because of what he was, she was gone. The silence in the penthouse was a living thing, vast and suffocating. It was the sound of his world ending, and all he could do was watch her disappear into the downpour, taking the only light he had ever known with her. It had all started 3 months earlier, on a Tuesday that was indistinguishable from any other. For Kang Jin-woo, life was a carefully curated series of obligations, a kingdom of glass and steel built on a foundation of whispers and blood. He was the head of the Yunwol Syndicate, a title he had inherited like a congenital disease. Power was his cage, wealth his burden. Loneliness was the air he breathed. That afternoon, a rival faction had grown bold, a clumsy assassination attempt that his men had neutralized with brutal efficiency. It was messy. It was tiresome. Seeking a moment of anonymity, a brief respite from the cloying scent of danger and sycophantic fear, he had ducked into the first place that didn't look like it belonged to him. It was a small cafe called Petal and Bean, tucked away on a side street, smelling of roasted coffee and damp earth. Inside, the frantic energy of Seoul's financial district seemed a world away. Soft music played, steam rose from a silver espresso machine, and behind the counter, a woman was meticulously arranging a small bouquet of freesias in a jam jar. That was the moment his world tilted on its axis. The frozen moment. She wasn't beautiful in the way of the women who moved through his circles, women sculpted by surgeons and ambition. Her hair was a little messy, tied back in a loose knot. A smudge of what looked like chocolate was on her cheek. She wore a faded gray apron over a simple t-shirt. But her eyes, as she looked up and noticed him standing there, were deep and clear, and held a weariness he recognized because it mirrored his own. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice calm, a little tired. Jin-woo found he couldn't speak. His gaze had dropped to her hands as she wiped them on her apron. And there, on the third finger of her left hand, was the ring. It was a modest thing, a band of silver cradling a small almond-shaped piece of jade, the color of a spring leaf. It was unmistakable. He would know it anywhere. It had been his mother's favorite, a simple trinket she had worn every day until her death, a piece she had cherished more than all the diamonds and gold his father had draped her in. He felt the blood drain from his face. The air grew thin. How? How was this possible? Seo Hana watched the man by the door. He was like a thundercloud that had wandered into a greenhouse. Tall, impossibly handsome, and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. He radiated an aura of quiet, lethal intensity, and he was staring, not at her exactly, but at her hand. It was unnerving. She had dealt with her share of strange customers, but this was different. He looked like he had seen a ghost. "Sir?" She tried again, a little more firmly this time. "If you're not going to order, there's a draft." The words seemed to break the spell. He blinked, a flicker of confusion in his dark eyes. He took a step forward, his movements fluid and unnervingly silent for a man of his size. "Americano," he said, his voice a low baritone that vibrated in the small space. "Black." "Coming right up," she said, turning away to escape the intensity of his gaze. She could feel his eyes on her as she worked, her hands suddenly clumsy as she tamped the coffee grounds. Who was this guy? A Cheeball heir? A movie star? He had the kind of face that belonged on a billboard, all sharp angles and brooding perfection, but there was something else there too, a hardness around the eyes, a faint, silvery scar that traced the line of his jaw. He didn't look like a man who had ever had an easy day in his life. She placed the cup on the counter. "That'll be 4,001. He pulled a wallet from his jacket, the leather impossibly soft. He handed her a 50,001 note, his fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. A jolt, like static electricity, shot up her arm. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes were on her hand again, fixed on the ring. "Keep the change," he said, his voice quiet. He picked up the coffee and moved to a small table in the corner, the one with the wobbly leg she kept meaning to fix. He didn't take his eyes off her. Hannah busied herself wiping down the counter, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs. This was creepy. Definitely creepy. Her best friend and roommate, Soo Jin, would have told her to call the police, but Hannah's instincts told her this wasn't that kind of threat. It was something stranger, deeper. He wasn't looking at her with lust or even simple curiosity. It was something else, a profound, unsettling recognition. She glanced at the jade ring. Her father had given it to her on her 18th birthday, just before he passed away. He'd bought it for a pittance at a flea market, saying the color reminded him of her eyes in the summer. It was her most precious possession. Why was this stranger staring at it like he'd lost his soul and just found it on her finger? Jinwoo sat, the coffee untouched before him. His mind was a maelstrom. The ring. His mother's ring. It had vanished after her funeral 10 years ago. He had assumed it was stolen by a greedy relative or a careless mortuary worker. He had his men search for it for years, a quiet, desperate obsession. He'd offered rewards that could buy a building in Gangnam. Nothing. It was gone. And now, here it was, on the hand of a barista in a tiny, forgotten cafe. He needed to know. He had to know how she got it. But how could he ask? "Excuse me, the ring you're wearing belonged to my dead mother. Where did you steal it?" No, he couldn't. The look in her eyes. She was not a thief. He knew it with an instinct that had kept him alive in a world of liars and predators. There was an integrity to her, a solidness that he found himself inexplicably drawn to. So he stayed. He sat in the corner, nursing his cold coffee, and watched her. He watched her smile kindly at an elderly woman, helping her with her coat. He watched her laugh at something a delivery boy said, a genuine, unburdened sound. He watched the way a stray lock of hair fell across her forehead as she concentrated on pouring latte art. He was memorizing her. He came back the next day, and the day after that. It became his ritual. He would leave the sterile silence of his penthouse, the cold company of his lieutenant, Min Jun, and the endless weight of his empire, and he would come here, to this small pocket of warmth and the scent of coffee. To her. Hannah started to expect him, the handsome, silent man in the corner. The Watcher. She'd nicknamed him in her head. His presence was a constant, a low hum of energy in her otherwise predictable day. He always ordered the same thing. An Americano, black. He always paid with a large bill and told her to keep the change. The tip jar had never been so full. After a week of this silent observation, she couldn't take it anymore. He was there, in his usual spot, the cafe empty, except for them. She wiped down a table near his, her movements deliberate. "Is the coffee that bad?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. He looked up, surprised. "No, it's fine." "You never drink it," she pointed out, nodding at the full cup on his table. "You just stare at it. And at me. Mostly at me." A faint blush colored his ears. The great Kang Jin-woo, who could make men twice his size tremble with a single look, was flustered by a barista. "I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable isn't the word. Curious." "And a little weirded out," she admitted, leaning against the table. "So, what's the deal? Are you a critic? A secret shopper? A very well-dressed stalker?" The corner of his mouth twitched, the barest hint of a smile. It transformed his face, softening the hard edges. It was like a punch to the chest. "None of the above." "Then what?" she pressed. I deserve to know why you've decided to make my cafe your personal surveillance hub. He looked at her, his gaze direct and serious. I like the quiet. It was a half-truth. He liked the quiet she created. And I enjoy watching you. He said it so simply, so devoid of any slick charm that it disarmed her. Watching me? What? Work, arrange the flowers, just be. Hannah felt her own cheeks grow warm. This was absurd, and yet she wasn't scared. She was intrigued. My name is Hannah, she said, offering a truce. Jinwoo, he replied. Just Jinwoo. No family name, no title. In this place, he wanted to be just a man. Their strange courtship began in earnest. He started speaking to her, asking about her day. He learned she worked a second job cleaning offices at night to pay off her deceased father's medical debts. He learned she dreamed of opening a small flower shop one day, a place even quieter than this one. She learned almost nothing about him. He was evasive, answering questions about his work with vague terms like family business and investments. Hannah knew he was hiding something. The car that sometimes waited for him, a black sedan with tinted windows, was not the car of a regular businessman. The man who drove it, who she saw once, had the wary, watchful eyes of a soldier. But when Jinwoo smiled at her, when he listened with such unnerving focus as she talked about the different meanings of flowers, she found herself not caring. She was a practical woman, grounded in the harsh realities of bills and double shifts. This felt like a fantasy, a brief, beautiful detour from her life, and she didn't want it to end. One evening, as she was closing up, he was still there. "You work too much," he said, his voice laced with a concern that felt startlingly genuine. "Debts don't pay themselves," she said with a shrug, stacking chairs onto tables. "Let me help you," he said, his tone quiet but firm. Hannah stopped, her arms full of a chair. "Help me how?" "I can pay them. All of them." She stared at him, a cold knot forming in her stomach. So this was it, the transaction. She was a project to him, a charity case. The fantasy dissolved, replaced by a familiar, bitter reality. "No," she said, her voice flat. "Thank you, but no." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely perplexed. To him, money was a tool, the simplest solution to any problem. "Because I don't take handouts," she snapped, her pride wounded. "And I don't know you. For all I know, you're a gangster or something, and that money isn't clean." The words hung in the air between them. A direct hit. Jinwoo's face went rigid, a mask of cold fury and something else. Something that looked like pain. He stood up, his towering frame seeming to suck all the air from the room. For the first time since she'd met him, Hannah felt a prickle of real fear. "You should be careful what you say," he said, his voice dangerously low. He turned and walked out, the bell on the door chiming a final lonely note into the silence. Hannah sank onto a chair, her legs trembling. She had been right. She had touched a nerve, stumbled upon the truth he was so carefully hiding, a gangster. The thought was ludicrous and terrifyingly plausible. She should be relieved. She had chased him away. She was safe. So why did she feel like she had just made the biggest mistake of her life? In the back of the sedan, Jinwoo stared out at the blurred city lights, his hands clenched into fists. A gangster or something? She had seen it. She had seen the darkness in him that he tried so hard to conceal when he was with her. Min-jun, sitting in the passenger seat, had been listening via the discreet bug he always planted when Jinwoo went somewhere alone. "She has sharp instincts," Min-jun said, his voice neutral. "I told you this was a bad idea, Hyung. A woman like that, she doesn't belong in our world." "Don't," Jinwoo warned, his voice a low growl. "It's the truth," Min-jun pressed, a rare act of defiance. "You're getting attached. It's a liability. What if one of our enemies saw you with her? She's a weakness, a target." "She is not a weakness," Jinwoo said, the words like chips of ice. But he knew Min-jun was right. His presence in her life put her in danger. The thought made him feel physically ill, and yet the idea of never seeing her again was worse. It was an amputation. He didn't go to the cafe for 3 days, 3 days of hell. The penthouse felt more like a prison than ever. The silence was deafening. He couldn't focus on work. Every decision felt meaningless. Every report, every number, every threat. It was all just noise. The only thing that felt real was the memory of her face, the sound of her voice. Hannah's days were gray. The cafe was just a cafe again. The watcher's corner was empty. She told herself it was for the best. She had a life to live, debts to pay. She didn't have time for mysterious, handsome, and almost certainly dangerous men. But her heart ached with a hollowness that surprised her. She missed his quiet presence. She missed their stilted conversations. She missed the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the world. On the 4th day, her shift at the office building ran late. It was after midnight when she finally left, the streets deserted and unnervingly dark. She pulled her thin jacket tighter and started the long walk to the subway station, her footsteps echoing in the silence. A block from the station, a van screeched to a halt beside her. 2 men jumped out, their faces shadowed. Fear, cold and absolute, seized her. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over it. They were dragging her toward the van. This is it, she thought. A wave of pure terror washing over her. This is how it ends. Suddenly, a black sedan appeared out of nowhere, its headlights pinning the men like startled rats. Before the van's doors had even closed, Jin-woo was out of his car. He moved with a speed and grace that was terrifying. It wasn't a fight. It was a dismantling. There was a sickening crack of bone, a choked cry of pain. Within seconds, both men were on the ground, groaning and incapacitated. Jin-woo turned to her, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He gently pulled the attacker's hand away from her mouth. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice tight with adrenaline. Hannah could only shake her head, her body trembling uncontrollably. She stared at the men on the ground, then back at him. The sophisticated man from the cafe was gone. In his place was someone else entirely, someone dangerous, someone lethal. He took off his expensive suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm and smelled of him. He guided her to his car, his hand a firm, protective weight on her back. Min-jun was already out of the car, his expression grim as he dealt with the aftermath, his phone to his ear as he spoke in low, rapid-fire Korean. "Who were they?" Hannah whispered as they sat in the plush leather interior of the car. "Scum," Jin-woo said, his jaw tight. "They won't bother you again." "How did you know? How did you find me?" He didn't answer immediately. He couldn't tell her he'd had one of his men following her for protection ever since their fight. That would only terrify her more. "I was worried about you," he said finally. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. He drove her home, the silence in the car thick with unspoken questions. When they arrived at her shabby apartment building, he walked her to the door. "Hannah," he said, his voice soft again. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry you were frightened. I'm sorry I put you in danger." "Was it because of you?" she asked, her voice small. "Were they after you?" He hesitated. Lying to her felt like a betrayal. "They were opportunists, but my presence in your life, it attracts the wrong kind of attention." She looked at him, at the raw concern in his eyes, at the faint tremor in his hand as he reached out, as if to touch her, then stopped. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach, but beneath it, something else was blooming. Gratitude, and a dizzying, terrifying attraction to this man who was 2 people at once, a gentle soul and a ruthless protector. "You saved me," she said. "I had to," he answered, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Before she could lose her nerve, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It was a brief, hesitant kiss, but it sent a shockwave through both of them. His lips were soft, a stark contrast to the hard lines of his face. For a moment, he was perfectly still, as if in shock. Then his hand came up to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair as he deepened the kiss. It was no longer hesitant. It was desperate. A kiss that spoke of loneliness and longing, of a connection that defied logic and safety. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. Hannah's mind was reeling. What was she doing? Kissing a man who had just dismantled two other men in a dark alley. A man who was everything she should run from. "This is crazy," she whispered. "I know," he whispered back, his forehead resting against hers. His eyes were closed, as if savoring the moment. He looked almost peaceful. This was the turning point. Hana couldn't deny her feelings any longer, and Jinwoo couldn't stay away. He began to cautiously let her into his life, or at least a carefully curated version of it. He took her to a private art gallery he owned, to a secluded beach house his mother had loved. In these places, far from the city and the shadows of his business, he was just Jinwoo. He was thoughtful, surprisingly gentle, and he listened to her with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the universe. He never touched the subject of money again. Instead, he found other ways to care for her. When the espresso machine at the cafe broke, a brand new one arrived the next morning, anonymously donated by a local business association. When she mentioned her mother, who lived in a small town and worried about her constantly, a state-of-the-art heating system was installed in her mother's home, courtesy of a supposed government grant. Hana suspected him, but she couldn't prove it, and a part of her was too grateful to protest. She was falling in love with him, deeply, irrevocably. She ignored the warning bells in her head. She ignored the worried looks from her friend, Soo Jin, who had seen the black car and the imposing driver. "Hana, be careful," Soo Jin had warned her one night. "Men with that much money and that much secrecy. It never ends well for the normal girl." "He's different," Hana had insisted, though even to her own ears, the words sounded naive. Jinwoo was also falling, faster and harder than he ever thought possible. She was a balm to his scarred soul. With her, the crushing weight of his legacy seemed to lift. He found himself smiling, laughing even. He started to imagine a different kind of future, one that included quiet mornings, the smell of flowers, and the sound of her laughter. A future that was impossible. His father, Kang Dai-ho, though semi-retired and living in guarded seclusion, still held immense influence. He heard whispers of Jinwoo's distraction. He summoned Jinwoo to his estate, a traditional Hanok fortress in the mountains. "I hear you are spending your time with a coffee shop girl," his father said, his voice like grinding stones. He sat, a shrunken but still formidable figure, before a go-board. "She has a name," Jinwoo replied, his voice cold. "Her name is irrelevant," Dae-ho dismissed with a wave of his hand. "She is a nobody, a vulnerability. The other families are watching. They see you softening. They smell weakness. You are the leader of the Yunwol. You do not have the luxury of personal attachments. End it." "No," Jinwoo said. The word was quiet, but absolute. His father looked up, his eyes like black chips of ice. "Do not forget who you are, boy. And do not forget what happens to the things we love when our enemies find them. Remember your mother." The threat was veiled, but clear. His mother had not died of a simple illness, as the official story went. She had been caught in the crossfire of a gang war his father had started, a victim of his father's own ruthless ambition. The memory was a wound that had never healed. Jinwoo left the meeting with his father's words echoing in his ears, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He knew he had to tell Hana everything. He owed her the truth, and he had to know if what they had was real enough to survive it. If she could see all of him, the monster and the man, and not run. He took her to the Namsan Tower, booking the entire restaurant so they would be alone, surrounded by the glittering panorama of Seoul. The city lights spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. "This is a lot," Hana said, looking around the empty, opulent space. "Is it even legal to rent out the whole place?" "Anything is legal if you have enough money," he said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. He took her hands across the table. His own were cold. "Hana," "There's something I have to tell you." She saw the gravity in his face, the fear in his eyes, and her heart began to pound. "Okay." He started from the beginning. He told her about his family, about the Unwall syndicate. He didn't soften the words. He told her about the illegal businesses, the violence, the power struggles. He told her he was the leader, the boss, the kingpin. He told her that his wealth, the wealth that bought them this private view of the city, was built on a foundation of crime and fear. "My name," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "is not just Jinwoo. It's Kang Jinwoo, and my name is a weapon. It's a threat. It's a curse." Hana listened, her face pale. The blood roared in her ears. A gangster. Her joke from that first day, thrown back in her face as a horrifying truth. The black car, the scar, the money, the fight in the alley. It all clicked into place, forming a picture that was uglier than she could have imagined. This beautiful, gentle man who listened to her dreams about flowers was a crime lord. She pulled her hands from his. The warmth was gone. She felt cold, violated. "You lied to me," she whispered. "I never lied," he said desperately. "I just didn't tell you the whole truth. I wanted to be the man you saw in the cafe, not this." "The man in the cafe doesn't exist," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and betrayal. "He's a fantasy. This is reality. The men you beat up," the fear in their eyes, "that was real. I did that to protect you. Protect me from a world you brought to my doorstep," she cried, standing up. "I can't do this, Jinwoo. I can't be with you. This world, it's everything I hate. It's built on hurting people, on exploiting the weak. My father worked his fingers to the bone his whole life and died in debt because of men like you, men who rigged the system." Tears streamed down her face. Every word was a dagger in his heart because he knew she was right. "Hana, please." "No." She shook her head, backing away from the table. "I have to go." She took off the delicate diamond necklace he had given her and placed it on the table. Then the earrings. They felt like shackles. "I can't take these. I can't take anything from you." His eyes fell to her hand, to the jade ring. The one thing that wasn't from him. The one thing that connected them in a way she could never understand. He wanted to scream at her, to tell her what it was, to use it to bind her to him. But he couldn't. It would be another manipulation, another exertion of power. He had to let her choose. "Hana," he pleaded, his voice breaking, "don't leave me." "I have to," she sobbed. "I can't become someone I don't recognize." And that was when he found himself standing at the window of his penthouse, watching her walk out of his life. The rain began to fall, mirroring the storm inside him. He saw the jade ring flash under a streetlight. His mother's ring. She had no idea she was wearing his past, his only link to a time before the darkness. He didn't ask for it back. He couldn't. When she'd left the restaurant, she'd paused at the door. Through her tears, she had looked at him one last time. "The ring," she had said, her voice thick with sorrow. "It was from my father. It's all I have left of him. He found it at a market. He said it was special." Special. The word echoed in the crushing silence. His mother's cherished ring, sold for a few won at a flea market, found by a good, honest man and given as a gift of pure love to his daughter. A daughter who Jinwoo had just lost. The universe had a cruel sense of irony. The days that followed were a blur of misery. For Hana, the world had lost its color. She went through the motions, making coffee, cleaning floors, talking to Sujin, but she felt hollowed out. Every corner of the cafe reminded her of him. Every quiet moment was filled with the memory of his voice, his rare smile. She would twist the jade ring on her finger, the ring her father gave her, and ache with a longing that felt like a physical illness. She had made the right choice. The only choice. But it felt like she had cut out her own heart. Her mother called, noticing the sadness in her voice. "Hana-ya, you sound tired." Is everything all right in Seoul? I'm fine, Iyama, Hana lied, forcing a brightness she didn't feel. Just busy. That man you mentioned, the one with the nice car. Are you still seeing him? Her mother asked, her tone laced with suspicion. No, Iyama, it didn't work out. Good, her mother said, relieved. Men with that much money are trouble. You stick to your own kind, Hana. Simple is better. Safer. Simple. Safe. Hana looked around her tiny apartment at the stack of bills on her table. This was her life. Simple, safe, and crushingly lonely. For Jinwoo, it was worse. The light had gone out of his world, leaving only the familiar shadows. He was consumed by a cold, burning rage. He threw himself into his work, but not with his usual cold precision. He was reckless. He took risks, initiated hostile takeovers of rival territories, and moved with a brutal efficiency that terrified even his own men. Hyung, you need to slow down, Minjun pleaded, watching Jinwoo operate on 3 hours of sleep and a diet of whiskey and grief. You're going to start a war we can't win. Let them come, Jinwoo had snarled, his eyes hollow. I have nothing left to lose. He did have one thing. From a distance, he watched over her. He had a discreet security team, men with no connection to the Yunwol, monitor her from afar. He read daily reports on her movements. Subject took the 8:15 a.m. subway. Subject bought groceries at the corner market. Subject spent 10 minutes looking at lilies in a flower shop window. That last detail was a particular kind of torture. His father, Daeho, saw his son's destructive spiral not as grief, but as an opportunity. He began to consolidate power among the old guard, the men who chafed under Jinwoo's more modern, less overtly violent leadership. They saw Jinwoo's recklessness as a sign that the son was finally becoming the father, a ruthless killer. They didn't understand it was born of despair. One night, Minjun came to the penthouse. He found Jinwoo staring at a single, framed photograph on his desk. It was the only personal item in the entire sterile office, a picture of a beautiful, smiling woman wearing a simple jade ring. Your mother, Minjun said quietly. Hana has her ring, Jinwoo said, not looking up. He finally told Minjun the whole story, the flea market, her father, the impossible coincidence. Minjun was silent for a long time. Fate is a strange thing, he said finally. What are you going to do? She said my world is built on hurting people, Jinwoo said, his voice raw. She's right. He looked up at Minjun, and for the first time since Hana had left, there was something other than rage or despair in his eyes. There was clarity, a terrifying, monumental resolve. So I'm going to tear it down. That was the beginning of the end of the Yunwol Syndicate as it had existed for 50 years. Jinwoo started the arduous, near-impossible task of going legitimate. He called a meeting of the family heads, the grizzled old captains who had served his father. We are getting out of the loan sharking business, he announced, his voice ringing with cold authority. The nightclubs that serve as fronts for illegal gambling will be sold. The smuggling routes will be closed. We are moving all our assets into legitimate construction, technology, and finance. The room exploded in outrage. This wasn't business, it was blasphemy. It was a betrayal of their entire way of life. Your father would spit on you for this, one old captain yelled. My father is not in charge, Jinwoo replied, his gaze sweeping over them, silencing them with its sheer force of will. I am. This is not a discussion. It is a command. Anyone who stands in my way will be removed. It was a declaration of war. His father, from his mountain retreat, orchestrated the opposition. There were attempts on Jinwoo's life, betrayals from men he had known since childhood. Minjun was his shadow, his shield, intercepting threats and neutralizing plots with ruthless efficiency. Jinwoo was dismantling his own kingdom piece by bloody piece. He sold assets at a loss, paid off corrupt officials to look the other way, and poured every remaining one into his new legitimate ventures. He was laundering his own soul. It took nearly a year. A year of living on the edge, of sleeping with a gun by his bed. A year of constant grinding work and the ever-present threat of betrayal. He lost half his fortune and a third of his men. Some were arrested. Some were killed by rivals who saw an opportunity in the chaos. Some simply left, unable to follow him into this new, uncertain world. But he did it. He bled the poison out of his empire. One cool autumn afternoon, almost a year to the day she had left him, Hannah was at her second job, cleaning the windows of a small, empty storefront she passed every day. The "For Rent" sign had been there for months. She often daydreamed about it, imagining it filled with buckets of tulips and peonies, the air thick with the scent of hyacinths. Her flower shop, a dream that felt further away than ever. She heard footsteps behind her and turned, her heart stopping in her chest. It was Jin Woo. He looked different. He was thinner, and there were new lines of exhaustion around his eyes. The expensive, impeccable suit was gone. He wore simple dark trousers and a plain black sweater. The aura of lethal power was still there, but it was quieter now, banked like coals. The scar on his jaw seemed more prominent, a reminder of a life he had fought to leave behind. "Hannah," he said. Her name was a breath of air. She couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, 1,000 emotions warring inside her: anger, relief, longing, fear. "I know I have no right to be here," he said, his voice low and steady, "but I had to see you." He took a step closer. "You were right, about everything, about my world, about the money. You were right." He didn't try to touch her. He just stood there, his hands hanging loosely at his sides, his gaze unwavering. "So I changed it. I tore it down. The Yunwall Syndicate doesn't exist anymore. Not in the old way. The money is clean now. The businesses are legitimate. I'm a CEO, not a boss. I build buildings now. I don't break legs." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was difficult. Hannah was speechless. She had spent a year trying to forget him, trying to convince herself that he was a monster. But the man standing in front of her was not a monster. He was a man who had moved heaven and earth, who had gone to war with his own world, all because of what she had said. Because of her. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice hoarse. "Because I couldn't live in a world you wouldn't be a part of," he said simply. "I'm not asking you to come back to my life, Hannah. I'm telling you I left it. I'm hoping you'll let me try to be a part of yours." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sorrow or betrayal this time. They were tears of overwhelming, heartbreaking hope. She saw the truth of his words in the deep exhaustion in his face, in the profound vulnerability in his eyes. He had done the impossible. He had redeemed himself. For her. She closed the distance between them and threw her arms around his neck. He flinched for a split second, as if unused to being touched so freely. Then his arms came around her, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her hair, and she felt a shudder rack his entire body. It was the tremor of a man who had been holding himself together by a thread for a very, very long time. "I missed you," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I missed you so much." "I know," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I know." He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands cupping her face. He looked down at her lips, then met her eyes, a silent question. She gave a small, tearful nod. The kiss was not like their first. It was not born of desperation or surprise. This was a kiss of homecoming. It was slow and deep and full of a year's worth of unspoken words, of lonely nights and silent pain. It was a promise. The end of one life and the beginning of another. When they finally parted, he was smiling. A real smile this time, one that reached his dark, beautiful eyes. He looked down at her hand, which was resting on his chest, at the jade ring. "There's one more thing I have to tell you," he said softly. "About your ring." He told her then. He told her about his mother, a gentlewoman trapped in a gilded cage. He told her how the ring had been her favorite, a symbol of a simpler life she had yearned for. He told her how it had vanished and how he had searched for it for a decade. "The moment I saw it on your finger," he trailed off, shaking his head in wonder. "I thought I was losing my mind. I thought it was a sign that I had finally found something pure in a world of filth. It was never about ownership, Hannah. It was never about me having a claim on you. It was about fate. It felt like my mother, from wherever she is, led me to you." Hannah looked down at the ring, her father's gift, and now, a link to a past she never knew. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a connection, a thread of destiny that had woven their two disparate lives together. "She would have loved you," Jinwoo whispered, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. 2 years later, the little storefront was no longer empty. A simple, elegant sign hung above the door. "Hannah's Flowers." Inside, the air was sweet with the scent of roses and freshly cut stems. Hannah, her face glowing with happiness, arranged a bouquet of bright yellow tulips. A small, simple gold band sat on her finger, just beside the jade ring. The bell on the door chimed. Jinwoo walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee from Petal and Bean, which he now owned. He looked relaxed, the shadows gone from his eyes for good. He was the CEO of a thriving development company, respected and maybe still a little feared for his sharp business acumen and unwavering integrity. He handed her a cup and kissed her, a slow, easy kiss of a man completely at home. "How's business, boss?" he teased. "Booming," she laughed. "Mrs. Choi just ordered 3 dozen roses for her husband's birthday. Apparently, she's forgiven him for shrinking her favorite sweater." He smiled, looking around the shop she had built. She had insisted on a business loan, which she was diligently paying back to his bank. Her pride was one of the things he loved most about her. His gaze fell on her hand as she snipped the end of a tulip stem. The jade ring sat beside her wedding band, a perfect union of past and present. It was a symbol of where they had come from, the impossible odds they had overcome, and the quiet, beautiful life they had built together. A life of redemption, earned through love. A life that was simple and safe and more precious than any kingdom. Love, at its most powerful, does not demand that we join another's world, but inspires us to build a better one together. It is a force of redemption, capable of dismantling empires built on darkness and rebuilding them on a foundation of hope and integrity. True strength isn't about the power you wield over others, but the courage you find to change yourself for the better, proving that even the most scarred souls can find peace in the light of a resilient heart. We really hope you enjoyed this educational piece of content and hope that you could understand the moral lessons behind it. The story of Jinwoo and Hana illustrates the profound theme of redemption and the transformative power of love to inspire monumental change. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, subscribing to our channel for more dramatic romances, and sharing this video with someone who believes in second chances. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. When Hana first learned the truth about Jinwoo's life, she chose to walk away. Do you think she made the right decision at that moment? Or should she have stayed and tried to change him from the beginning? And for our next story, which character would you like to see find their own happily ever after? Let us know by voting in the comments. Should we tell the story of A. Min Jun, the loyal right-hand man, who finds himself protecting a brilliant prosecutor determined to expose his past? B. Soo Jin, the supportive best friend, who accidentally falls for a rival chaebol heir with a secret of his own?